Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of an Involved Review. And this isn't just any episode of an Involved Review. This is a very special episode because we're going to be talking about something today that's near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about the remake of Final Fantasy VII. This is our first episode where we're going to go outside of the professional wrestling world, and particularly outside of the dark side of the ring world. And we're going to talk about something that has brought a lot of joy to millions of people. But before I get started, our guest today, very happy to have him here. He is the general manager for Palmetto Championship Wrestling. Welcome, Dave Foster.
How's it going?
What's going on, man? I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today.
Yeah, man, it's an honor, and it's like talking about besides wrestling, as you said, it's talking about one of like my other favorite things that I've had in my life since kind of I started having sentient thoughts. So it's gonna be cool to take I just finished Final Fantasy VII, the remake. It's gonna be cool to kind of take a trip down memory lane and share some like ridiculous stories of me growing up playing this game because I have a few of them. So yeah, I'm pumped, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we are gonna let this first part here be spoiler free. So when we start getting into the spoiler territory, you can stick around if you haven't finished the game yet. But when we get into that spoiler territory, we'll definitely make sure we give a spoiler warning, so that everybody knows. Hey, if you haven't finished the game, go finish it. Come back, avoid Reddit, uh, and uh, and finish up the rest of the episode. So, Final Fantasy VII, the remake, man, and of course there couldn't be a remake without the original Final Fantasy VII, which came out in 1997 for the original PlayStation. Um, so we look at them making a remake of this game here. The first time a remake of Final Fantasy VII was teased by Square Enix, which was still Square at the time, was in 2000 that they were going to remake 7, 8, and 9 for the PlayStation 2. Um, Nothing ever really else was heard about the project. When the PlayStation 3 was debuted at E3, this was in 2005, I believe. Yeah, 2005. At E3, there was like a little tech demo that showed a little bit of like Final Fantasy VII gameplay, and that really sparked everybody saying, "Hey, look, they're going to do a remake." Square denied there was a remake in the works. In 2007, when the 10th anniversary of the game came up, there was another like kind of just outpouring of people saying, "Hey, are they going to make a remake?" And Square came out and said, "Look, it's too complex right now. Um, we can't do it on current hardware. We'd have to take all this stuff out of the game. We just can't do it. We're going to focus on newer games." Um, and then we got the actual announcement for the PlayStation 4 that they were going to do a remake, and this was in 2013. So when was the first time that you heard that they were going to remake Final Fantasy VII, and what were your kind of thoughts on it at the time?
Sure. So I heard about the tech demo for PlayStation 3, and anytime you're on Reddit or IGN, they always blow it up to be a bigger thing than it is. Release date TBD, but it's coming. And then, like you said, 2013, you said that they were starting to remake it. I remember them having some images or maybe even a short video of a kind of the opening where Cloud jumps off the train. But I mean, then nothing for years. And it's so great to finally have it out now, or, a part of it out now. But yeah, I mean, it's their cash cow. I mean, it was Square's cash cow. Final Fantasy VII was, it's arguably the best game of all time. I'm going to say that right now. To me, probably the best game of all time, both in memories and the fact that they were able to accomplish a 3-disc game like that with so much intricacy. I mean, they must have started developing that, 92, 93 to release it in 97, and they had that much content. So just to see it, the fact that their magnum opus couldn't be duplicated until 3 generations of a console later just kind of shows how amazing that first game was. And as we'll talk about later in this episode, the things that they had to change to make it so that it was actually playable on the current gen console. So it's been a long time coming. And when I finally saw the download, because I don't buy physical copies anymore, because who does that?
Right.
But when I finally saw, it is definitely a lost art. Plus, I guess I can't go to GameStop right now anyway because of the coronavirus. But um, it was crazy to like open up, click the X button and then have the welcome screen of the game, and just hearing the music and all that stuff. It's crazy that it took this long to get here, but it's awesome that it's finally here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think playing back through the original, you brought up the 3 disc game and like kind of what it was at the time. Playing back through the original, I started playing through it a couple weeks before the remake came out, and I got to about middle way through disc 1. Remake came out. I stopped. I set it down. I played the remake all the way through, and then I picked up the original again. And I've played every Final Fantasy 1 through 9 to completion. Um, and I played some of the other ones after that, but I never finished any of them. If you look at 6, right? So they went from Final Fantasy 6 on the Super Nintendo, and that game was amazing at the time. But you look at those like 2D, like the sprites and everything that they had at the time, and then you look at Final Fantasy 7, you're like, this was the first attempt. This was not the fourth, fifth, sixth. This was the first three-dimensional game that Square made in terms of an RPG, in terms of this kind of scale. If you think about that and what they were able to do with the PlayStation 1, which was less powerful than the weakest cell phone you can buy today, it's amazing. It is an incredible technical feat, it's an incredible artistic feat. Um, and a lot of the things that they had to do in that game were just, I mean, it was crazy what they were able to do. The mastery of their professions that it took of all these people coming together to make that game. And then you have the soundtrack. Everybody remembers the soundtrack. Nobuo Uematsu is this legendary composer, and he's one of the best composers of all time. Not speaking specifically in terms of video games. Um, so you look at everything they were able to do with that, and yeah, it is this massive feat to recreate it. And I do think that if they just tried to do it on the PS2, they'd try to do it on the PS3. I think they would have come up short. It was a long 23 years, but I mean, getting into it, I think it was worth it. But before we get more into the remake, I know that we both want to gush about the original and our experiences with it. So you being the guest, I'm gonna let you go first on that.
Cool. Awesome. So, game came out in '97, so I was about 9 or 10 at the time. Um, and they came out. Was a really thick 3 disc set, physical copy. And when I got it, my older brother, who's about 10 years older than me, so he's about 19, 20 at the time, took one look at the discs, took one look at me, and said, "There's no way you're smart enough to beat that game." And I was like, so you know what I did? I bought a Game Shark. Do you remember Game Shark?
Yeah, man.
Absolutely. So, I've been accused on many occasions of playing games on easy, but I'm not trying to play games that give me more stress. So, it probably all started with the Game Shark. So I bought the Game Shark. I was at level 99 through the first Mako reactor. It was great. I was just hacking, slashing everybody. I think it all comes down to just proving my brother wrong, which is a level of psychology we don't need to get into today. Uh, but I finally, I had the strategy guide as well. So I'm on the third disc. I'm getting ready to face Sephiroth and for the last time. And I decided to go for the Knights of the Round, which is of lore, the best materia the summon you could possibly get in the game.
Of all
But
time.
of all time, yeah. But before you get there, you have to do all of these horrible chocobo breeding, pain in the butt uh, excursions, and you have to breed chocobos to get a gold chocobo, and so and so. After 70 hours in that game, I finally got the gold chocobo. Went to go to get the Knights of the Round. So I turned on my PlayStation, went to go get the Knights on the Round, and my brother, he says accidentally, deleted my entire save. Gone. 70 hours just gone. So I do have a caveat to this. I have seen the ending of Final Fantasy VII, but I have never beaten the game. I'm thinking about actually doing what you did and getting it on the Switch and playing through it. because I've never I know so much about it and I've seen all the movies, I've played all the secondary games to it. I've never actually beaten it because my brother deleted my game after he told me I was too stupid to play it. So that's like where, I mean, not only has Final Fantasy VII shaped the way I game, it's actually like helped me with my life philosophy. But then he deleted the game anyway, so it didn't really matter all that much. So
Man,
that's why I welcome the Final, and ever since Final Fantasy VII has been the litmus test for any single type of RPG. I mean, there were a lot of great RPGs on PlayStation. I loved 8, I loved 9. Chrono Cross was amazing. Parasite Eve was amazing. Parasite Eve 2, not so much. But whenever I'm looking at RPGs and leveling up systems and weapon systems and accessory slots and things like that. The litmus test is always going to be Final Fantasy VII and the materia system and the fighting system there. So it's always what I compare. It is it is what I compare every single other game I ever play to. So yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's
my
the
favorite.
measuring stick for sure, man. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you look at materia, and that system was just so genius. Um, it's just it's hard to come close to that, like all the different combinations you could do with it, how customizable it was. I mean, if you looked at the Final Fantasies before 7, most of them, your characters came like you either picked like a job or a class for them, and they were like kind of predisposed to being like one type of thing. Like this guy's a fighter, this guy's a rogue, this guy's a mage. Or you could sometimes, like in Final Fantasy V, for instance, you had a pretty intricate job system, and you could kind of mix and match it up. Um, but with this one, man, none of your characters are, they have different stats, but none of them are forced into certain roles, and you could do certain things with them. Um, the thing about this, the original Final Fantasy VII, to me, this is the game that made it where I would classify myself as a gamer. Prior to
Mm-hmm.
this, I had video game systems, but it was the stuff that like pretty much everyone had. Like I played Mario, you know, and like I remember when Mortal Kombat came out, and it was like, oh, this game has blood in it, and I played like Sonic and stuff like that. I had a Sega Genesis. I played all the stuff on that. Um, but it wasn't like that was like the main thing I was doing with my time. It wasn't like today where it's like I'm at work and I'm sitting there like, oh man, I can't wait to go home and play video games. That's and like Final Fantasy VII, somebody got it for me for my birthday. I had no clue about it. I had never heard of Final Fantasy anything, and I sat down and started playing it, and I was like, this is just unlike anything I've ever seen before. This is just my you know let's see, I would have been 10 at the time. My 10-year-old brain was just like melting at,
Mm-hmm.
how intricate and like how detailed all this was. And then I was like, oh man, I don't even have a memory card. That's how little time I spent really gaming. I was playing like Tekken 2 and stuff like, stuff that I really didn't care about having a memory card for back then. So what I would do is every day when I got home from school, I would start playing Final Fantasy VII from the beginning, and I would get as far as I could get. Uh, and like that usually ended up being. I remember like the very first time I like got out of Midgar, and it put me on the world map, and it was like, what do you mean? There's like a whole world out here. Like I've just been in this one city the whole time, and there's just you think maybe the game is just gonna be all within Midgar, but then there's like no, there's this whole giant other world. This whole world to explore, and that was just mind blowing to me. And I've probably played through that section of the game like 40 times or more until I could save up to get a memory card.
It is definitely my one of my favorite sections in the game too, and it is definitely the piece of the game that I played most as well. It's almost like they can make a game out of just that section.
That
Um,
is weird.
so
It's like they could do
it's kind
that.
of weird, yeah. But no, I mean, I absolutely agree. What you were saying, like it's what made you a gamer. To me, same thing. It's like the first game that I could like own as my game. Like Final Fantasy VII was my game. You talked about Tekken and everything else that was out. Resident Evil is one of my favorite franchises, but it all comes back to Final Fantasy VII and just trying to recreate kind of like the way I felt and how immersed I was. Very rarely have I'm trying to like shortlist a couple other games that really made me feel that immersed. The Last of Us is really the only other game that I can think of that really made me feel that immersed the whole time. But yeah, that's what made me a gamer, and it's really cool to like you said. I want to go back and play it because I bet there's so much stuff my 10-year-old pea-sized brain missed. All the little things and the stuff said in between, reading in between the lines, and there's so much, like you said, depth and the soundtrack and the fighting system, the story. It's crazy that they were able to make a game that comprehensive in breadth and in depth that it's still 23 years later. Now us old guys are playing it along with the next generation of people. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, man, it's just it's on a different level from anything else that was came out during that same time. And if I had been a game developer back then, for another company, and that dropped, and I started looking at it, I would have been like, "Oh my God, how are we going to compete with this?" And no one really did. I mean, when it came to JRPGs at the time, Square was king of that
Mhm.
easily during that generation, and they put out so many good titles. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Xenogears. I don't know if you ever played that one, but you kind of riled off all the other like really awesome stuff they had at the time. But Xenogears was kind of like a almost like kind of anime based game that they put out at the time. That was fantastic, and it was one of my favorite games for years and years, and I still play through it sometimes. Um, and then they also another game kind of in that category on PlayStation One wasn't made by Square, but Sony tried their hand at it, and they came out with Legend of Dragoon,
Yeah,
which
I love that game.
it's a fantastic game. But you
Mhm,
also, when you play it, you can tell that they sat down and played Final Fantasy VII, and they were like, we're gonna borrow from this. So I mean, they definitely heavily borrowed from FF7, but everybody I know that played, I don't know anybody that played Legend of Dragoon that didn't love it. So
mhm,
it wasn't like they just copy and pasted it. And even if they had, people still would have loved it because it was, I mean, the source material was just so good. Um, so before we start getting really into it, one last thing I wanted to talk about is when you heard the remake was coming out and it was official, like, okay, we're going to get this section of the game, we're going to get it on PS4. It is coming out, it has a release date. Was there anything going into it that was like a deal breaker for you where you were like, all right, if they change X, I'm going to hate this?
Uh, it's kind of like, okay, so think about your favorite band and they're about to release a new album. And it might not, if, even if it's kind of like managing your expectations, even if it isn't what you expected the album to be like. I trust that band more than I trust my own taste earbuds, essentially. So with this, whatever decisions they made, I was going to just kind of trust because one, I didn't really have much. You don't really have much of an option. You can't tell them, "Hey, I'd like to talk to Mister Square, please." So I think that's where kind of where we may differ. Down the line in this conversation, I just knew that I knew how long the game was going to be. I knew what part they were going to cover. That part just happens to be my favorite part of the game. And up until the ending, which we'll talk about later, I think we were pretty much on the same page the whole time. There was no real deal breakers for me. I just trusted the process, and I was really happy. Man, I mean, even just the soundtrack, like it was great. And one thing, before we kind of move forward to the Final Fantasy to the remake, Final Fantasy VII existed, and then 8 and 9, which were all three of those are classics, more or less, depending on
Amazing.
who you ask. But I didn't love 10. I didn't love 11, 12, 13, 14. I liked 15 just fine, which is kind of the same structure as, but the point is, it took them 3 generations of consoles to get back to something that is kind of true north to them. Like PlayStation 2 didn't have any of these types of games, Final Fantasy 10, but none of these RPGs really were very short lists. PlayStation 3 really didn't have any of it either. It took 23 years to get back around to this with using the current technology. And I think that just goes to show how in depth this game was, or even just this genre in general. So
I'm really glad you brought that up because I I loved 7, 8, 9. I couldn't get into 10. I
I mean,
didn't
either.
I didn't really play it when it came out. It was a few years later. Other things had come out that I really loved, and the voice acting in that game, it's one of the first games that like big major AAA titles that had voice acting, but the voice acting is atrocious. It's
Horrible.
it's possibly one of the worst voice act. I mean, it's possibly one of the most the worst voice acting tracks to ever exist. It's awful.
It's almost
Um,
like the producer was telling the voice actor, "Hi, yeah, could you try that line again, except make it less believable and more phony? Thank you." Like,
there's a Dragon Ball Z dub that's famous. They call it the Big Green dub, and it's like this like it's some European country that speaks like a weird dialect of English, and they did a dub of it, and it's just, I mean, you can look it up. Look up Big Green
I
dub
will.
on YouTube, and the reason it's called the Big Green dub is that's what they call Piccolo in the series. They call him Big Green, and like it's still not as bad as Final Fantasy did, and it's one of those like it's so horrible that it's funny and you like it type things, but Final Fantasy 10 is not. Um, and it's similar to Final Fantasy 7. They tried to kind of set that same benchmark for themselves. New console, new technology. We're going to come out with this ambitious RPG, and they did not nail it in the same way that they nailed 7. Um, 11 I never
We may
played.
even be, and we may even be in the minority here as far as Final Fantasy X, because I know a lot of people love that game, and
Yeah.
to them, I ask, why?
I've
Why?
tried it so many times. Like I got the remaster when it came out for like
Me
PS3 or
too.
something, and I tried, and I was just like, I hate this. I just hate this. I
Hate
mean,
you,
this is
Titus. I
awful.
hate you. Yeah.
It's like I'm gonna take a break from this and go pull out my toenails with some pliers. Like this, I hate this, and so I never got into 11. It was like the first online one, and I
Hmm.
played some MMORPGs, but I wasn't into that. I never really tried it. I didn't like 12 at all. 13 might be the worst entry in the whole
Yeah.
series. You know what? I'll take that back. There's no might be. It is. Um, 14. I actually have an active subscription to Final Fantasy 14 right now, and it's not awful. I mean, if you're gonna play an online an MMO type game, it's definitely not awful. It has a lot of really cool like Final Fantasy tropes and stuff in it. But when that game first came out, it was really bad. It was
Hmm.
really bad. They actually had to take the whole thing down and remake it from scratch and re-release it, and the re-release is pretty good. I also hate 15. I don't like 15
Huh.
either. So, so my like expectations going into this, when they first said they're gonna do the remake, I'm like, holy shit, they're gonna do the remake. And then as it got closer, I was like, they're gonna mess it up. They're gonna mess it up. I was like, there's no way that they're gonna come out of this and it's going to be awesome. I was like, they're going to break the combat. They came out and they said, well, it's definitely not going to have the turn-based combat in it. And I was like, oh my god, they're going to make it like 15. And with 15, I just think that combat in 15 is so like spammy. It's like I can't
Hmm.
tell what's going on. There's just stuff happening everywhere, and I just hate it. I mean, I just don't like it at all. So, I was like, they're gonna break this, they're gonna break that, and then I found out it was just a Midgard portion, and I'm like, okay, I have no faith in Square. Like I have all the faith in the world in the original property and the fact that if they were to just one to one translate it to like today's graphics and mechanics and things, that it would be perfect. But I didn't have a lot of high expectations going into it. But then they showed some gameplay. I think maybe like a month or so before it was supposed to come out, and I was like, okay, all right, I'm on board now. Um, And man, let's get into it. You
Let's
know,
do it.
let's do it. So we're gonna throw the spoiler warning out here. We've kind of tiptoed around this for long enough. So if you haven't finished the entirety of Final Fantasy VII Remake, if you haven't beat it through the ending, this is probably where you want to set it down. There are huge spoilers ahead. Uh, and not just spoilers for the remake, spoilers for the original game. If you haven't, 23-year-old spoilers, probably some spoilers for Advent Children. If you haven't seen that, probably might even be some Crisis Core spoilers. You never know. So anything Final Fantasy VII related, if you haven't gone through it and you don't want to get spoiled, this is where you stop. But I think that's long enough to give folks going into it. Um,
Can I open up the spoiler
you
part
can,
by
you
asking
absolutely
you a
can,
question?
you can.
Hey, what's a whisper?
We're just gonna rip that band-aid.
Oh, oh man.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get it out now because I don't want people listening to this to get the idea that I hate this game because I don't. I love 90% of it, but the 10% I don't love,
You loathe it.
I
You
loathe.
hate
Yeah,
it so much.
yeah. Um, the whispers are awful, um, and I think I don't want to feel this way, but I feel like the whispers are a metaphor for fans of the original game, and it's basically like Square saying, "This is our IP. We can do whatever we want with it." Um, and yeah, I mean, and if you're in the spoiler free or the spoiler section here, you know that you kind of destroy the whispers at the end of the game, and I thought that was sort of symbolic for basically Square Enix saying, "Look, anything is possible going forward. It's wide open. We can change whatever." And I don't appreciate that at all, to put it mildly. um, I
Although they did come out and say that it wasn't going to change that much, which I'm like, eh, like crap or get off the pot about it. Like
right.
either you made such a huge statement at the end by the most metaphorical statement, basically just dumping urine on Kitchen's head and tell him it's raining. But yeah, but then you come out and say, "Oh, we're not going to change that much." I'm like, dude, just double down. Say we're going to change everything. Say, yeah, you get Aerith until the end of the game. Like, come on, man.
Well, and
So,
I don't feel like they're gonna kill her at the same spot. I don't think she'll. I think she might probably like sacrifice herself to summon Holy, like she does in. I mean, in the first game, that's
mhm.
basically what she does anyway. But I don't think Sephiroth will kill her. I think they'll change that. You know, so they sort of. It's implied throughout the game that Aerith and Sephiroth are both like aware of the how things are going to turn out. It's never directly stated, but it's heavily implied that both of them know what's up. Um, and that makes me feel like things are going to be different, very different. I don't know though. I, I, they didn't change a whole lot, but what they did change, especially with the ending, um, is pretty rough. Um, I don't like the design for them either. Like I don't like the Dementor looking
Oh yeah.
idea for it. I mean, it was just they were so Harry Potter Dementors. You
I
know,
thought about
it's
Muppets Christmas Carol, the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come or whatever. That's what it looked like. Everyone said Dementors, but I'm not a Harry Potter fan. But I was thinking definitely Muppets.
the now the hooded like black cloak guys. I
Mhm.
was fine with that because that's a premise that is in the original game, and they just expanded on it. Like in the original game, you get to Nibelheim before you run into these guys. But in this game, they were like, well, we're gonna go ahead and put some of them in Midgar too, and would make sense that they would be in Midgar. And then it would make sense that they would be really almost everywhere. But it would make sense that they were in Midgar, so I was fine with that. I actually really liked that. Um, just
How would you how would you feel about getting more FaceTime with Jesse, Wedge, and Biggs? Because I knew that Band-Aid was going to be tough to rip off at the end because my fiance, who was watching me play most of it with me, um, you know, she never had seen the original game. She's like, "Oh, I really like these characters." One of them is voiced by one of Dwight Schrute's cousins in The Office, which is great. Wedge is that actor, so I loved it. But like as they were just dumping time into these three characters. It was just made me so sad. Like visiting Jesse's, like stealing from Jesse's father who has cancer was the weirdest thing
Yeah.
I probably did in that game. But second to picking a dress for Cloud.
Yeah, I mean, and we all knew that was coming.
Yeah.
We'll get to Wall Market in a bit because I definitely want to gush about that. But um, I loved the expanded roles of Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse because they were kind of these like throwaway characters. You didn't really feel it really hard in the original game, but in the remake, man, Jesse's death was just it was just gut wrenching. You
Yeah,
know.
because she throws the grenade and the I call them Dementors now. Now I'm stuck on that. And the Whispers like block the grenade, right? Essentially, what is
Yeah.
that? That's what happens. Yeah,
Yeah, I
got
mean,
her.
I don't like anything that they do. I figured out around the church, um, when they had gone when you have the church scene with Aerith and the Whispers show up, and I figured out right then that they were making sure that the original timeline was kept, and I was just like, oh God, no. And then the whole like way you're traveling back to her house, after that scene, I'm just like, all I could think about that whole time was like, they're holding up the original timeline. That means we're gonna break it somehow. And then, but as this game did so many times, we get to her house and they pan over the field
Mm,
and
I
they
got
lay
goosebumps.
on that theme. Yeah, I mean, my hair's standing up right now on my arm.
Yep,
You can't.
yep,
Well, webcam's
yep.
not good enough, but that just every time they do something to piss you off, they just they lay on the score, which is
Yeah,
just
even
amazing.
just little like or you'll be I think they did this a few times as you're approaching. I love like the jukeboxes were really cool because you'd hear the score from afar and be like, oh, what's that score? And you just kind of walk towards the jukebox and you get to collect all those, which is totally a Final Fantasy 15 thing. They not ripped off, it's their property. Um but I love since we're talking, I kind of want to talk about the score because I mean that score. I'm pretty sure I like a lot of the music I like because of the influences of that an original score and the fact that they were able to reproduce the score and did nothing to it except make it better. I don't have any the score completely exceeded my expectations. I don't know if you have like any caveats, but like man, it was so dope to see those scores realized with a little bit of extra money and kind of the production value and all that because they didn't change a single lick at all. They just added stuff around it that just made it more full body and it was oh man, it ruled.
Everything that they remade from the original, I loved. I mean, absolutely loved. Like the Sector 5 theme was one of the ones that really got to me. I was like, this is so dope. Hip Hop de Chocobo is probably the only black mark on the whole thing. I
Mm.
hated, hated, hated that. I was like, what is this? I was like, by the time I get to the Chocobo Ranch, I need this shit to be gone. Like, I need you to
Yep.
be done with it. Get over it. Um, I mean, the score is just so good. Let's talk about the graphics, man. I've got on the screen right now some like comparisons between the original game and the remake, and just, I mean, didn't they just do such a great job with the creatures, the character models?
Yeah, I was telling Steph about about how amazing the first game was, and she was watching me play the most recent game, and then she got on her phone and started looking at the polygons from the initial game, and she literally is like, "Is this what you're talking about?" And I was like, yeah, like it's amazing." She goes, "You cared that much about like that little like polygon
It
with
was
yellow
everything.
hair?" And I was like, it's everything to me.
Yeah.
But the graphics of the first one were so good, but this is just and I knew that they were gonna have to break this game up into chunks because there's no way you can get as much detail as they put into this first in Midgar in general I knew you weren't gonna they weren't gonna be able to make a complete game like that. And yeah, so they padded it with a few side missions that weren't that great, but in order to get those graphics and one thing about the graphics, but another thing is like the weight of the controller, like when you hit stuff, like all those like secondary sensory things that kind of happen as you were going through. Like I love that little stuff too. Like it's not the physical graphics were amazing, but just the way the game felt and how smooth it was. Besides when you have to open boxes with Cloud Sword, I found that to be really clunky, and I wish like that they made that faster. But I mean, it's so smooth, and multiple times playing through this game. In fact, probably the whole time, I was just grinning ear to ear with how good it looked, and how well they did. The voice acting was amazing, and I'm just, yeah, man, bring on part two. I don't know why you hate the ending so much, but I love it. I love it because it's a swerve.
It
So good.
it is an awful swear, but I will tell you about those boxes though. Is Cloud, you know, when you come in and you swing the sword, it's fine, but it's like there's always like one box that you
Yeah.
miss, and then you have to stand there like
Yeah.
and you're like trying to get at it, and it was clunky. It was clunky.
Yeah, that's the only clunky. Everything else was so smooth. The battle system and everything was smooth. I never felt so. What you said about 15, about how you felt like there was just too much happening in a battle. It's kind of, I just remember this one part in 15 where you enter a base and then there's just like you don't control anybody else but you in that game. I don't think it's been a while, but there's just enemies all over you, and you just had to mow through them all. I like this game because you knew the enemy types for the most part, which is great because it's all throwback. But two, it felt like there wasn't until the very end. It felt like they kind of fed you bits. I felt like it was paced really well as far as skill level and being acclimated to the content.
You know, the combat was the major gotcha for me. I was just like, after being so unimpressed with 15, I was like, they're gonna botch the damn combat. But when the demo came out and I played it, I loved it, man. Like, if you ask me if I prefer the original combat, probably 8 times out of 10, it depends on the mood I'm in. I'm gonna say yes. But there's a lot you could do with the combat in this game that you couldn't have done with the combat in the old game, because the combat in the old game, you couldn't really vary it a whole lot. It was like, our guys are on this side, your guys are on that side. You got different abilities and like strengths and weaknesses and things that you could throw in there. But with this, there was a lot of variation they threw in there. Um, One of the creature designs that really like blew me away. I think the thing that blew me away the most was the Hell House.
Yeah, it was
Um,
awesome.
I was expecting to run into it, and they played with you so hard on this. When we had Cloud and Aerith, and we were making our way, kind of up to Wall Market, you kind of expected to run into the house, and then it wasn't there, and I was like, they took out the damn, they took out the damn house.
Yeah.
And then you get into the Coliseum, and they're like, oh, but we've got one more battle, and then I was just like, and then that house killed me like several times. It was like,
Yeah.
not only is the house here, but we're gonna destroy you with the house. And there we
Yeah,
go.
when I was looking up stuff on IGN, and they were talking about like the hardest bosses. This is before I played, so I spoiled it a little bit for myself. But they were like Hell House, Hell House, Hell House. I was like, Hell House. I don't even. And then I remembered like where it was in the original game. But I mean, this thing is just like ginormous, and it's just. I think Cloud says it's just like it's just a house, and then it just kills you a bunch of times.
It,
I like the Coliseum. I actually really, really liked what they did with Wall Market. Wall Market was whenever I play video games, I kind of think of things. One, I usually don't have as much time as I've recently had to play video games, so usually it's very much like point A to point B. I'm trying to get to the end as quick as possible, but I found myself in Wall Market just wandering around, like absorbing the scenery, and I found myself doing that a lot in the game, which I thought was pretty great.
if there's a portion of the game that's superior in the remake to the original, it's Wall Market.
Mhm.
They, I mean, I cannot express to you the amount of just absolute joy that I got from the wall market, like just that whole thing. I mean, they killed it down to the dresses, the remake to the Honeybee Inn, which they had to not make it quite an obvious like brothel, you know.
Yeah.
Um, there was just a lot of stuff that they really just they laid in on with that. I mean, just the lighting and the just the
Mhm,
atmosphere. They couldn't do it with the original. And you brought up the side quests. I really liked most of those. I liked the areas of this game where they fleshed things out. I
mhm.
disliked the areas of the game where they tried to change things. And we'll get into the story and the ending and stuff in a minute. But overall, man, when it comes to the character models, like a lot of the creatures, um, help me on this. That creature, uh, the Don Corneo's creature you fight in the
Oh,
sewers. I
in the
can't
right in
remember
the
his name.
sewers. Oh crap! I don't know. Someone will tell us.
Yeah, someone will come on here and correct us.
Oh
They'll be
man,
like, "You peasants, it's this."
I thought you guys said you what
You love
Final
the
Fantasy
game. You
fans.
don't remember the
Yeah,
name of all the bosses? Get out of here.
yeah. Oh
But
gosh, it's gonna tip my tongue too. That's
but they
gonna bug
they
me.
they did such a great job with
Yeah.
him. So
Well,
um,
and I like how you knew the beats of the game. Like, I knew that when I fell through the floor there, that I was gonna have to fight that Cerebrus. Nope, that's not it. That was my best shot. But you go through the sewers, then you go through the train yard, and then back up. But I liked how I knew what was coming, so that if they deviated, I could be like, oh, they deviated, like, and just be like, oh, I caught that because I like catching those things in like movies and stuff like that too. Like all like the little accoutrement that kind of add to everything is the stuff I really like.
Abzu is the thing's name.
Yes,
Yeah.
there it is.
And I loved what they
We
did with
did
like the
it.
horns and like the different. I mean, they got the combat so that they made it strategic, but it still had a lot really good action feel to it. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I thought all the games since 10 were really missing was any kind of strategy to it. It's like I don't like these like button mashing type games where
Mm-hmm.
it's just like I'm just gonna pound the controller and something's gonna happen and I might win, might lose. I just don't like any of that stuff, and I'm gonna get probably flamed for this, but that's why I don't like any of the Kingdom Hearts series. I just feel like you're just mashing buttons. Um,
Well, here I'll do you one better. I just don't like Disney.
okay, well, yeah, we.
Whoa.
Anyway, so on
All right,
to,
heel turn. Here we
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah, man. That's a bold ass
Don't
statement
worry,
to make.
I just got the stares from the fiance. She's not happy with me that I said I do not like Disney. We're talking about Kingdom Hearts. But yeah, I never got into Kingdom Hearts. I think I played like the first one and it was fine. But to me, once again, it's no Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, the so one thing also was really impressed with this game, the leveling system and
Mhm.
how in depth all of it is. Like, okay, so all the weapons have a different ability they can teach me. That's cool.
Mhm. That you can
Um,
keep.
Yeah. And then all the weapons have their own individual like level up system. So like even a weapon I got at the beginning of the game still has merit throughout the rest of the game. That was amazing. And then like
Mhm.
how each character they have their little like triangle ability that does something different and makes each one of the characters feel really unique. I just thought that the depth of this was impressive and it's not something we've seen in a modern RPG in a long time.
And the cool thing is about that system, like you can go as in depth as humanly possible, but they also don't like gatekeep the game from you if you did want to simplify it. So for me, and you're making me want to replay both Final Fantasy Sevens now. But to me, as far as the level up system, I knew who I wanted to have on offense and defense or balance, so I just kind of let it auto populate. It was just a system that I was like, I want to get through the game. I want to get through the game. I want to experience all the moments. I want to do all that stuff. Once again, point A to point B, straight line for that. So, but it didn't gatekeep you from like if you didn't want to do those things, it does it for you, which I thought was really great. Like how you can customize how ever much or how little that you want to, which I thought was nice for me.
Yeah, I I liked that aspect too, and a lot of the times with the weapons, like I would go in, and I was doing them like every time I'd get some SP, I'd go in there and I'd fill in one of the little slots on the weapon. But kind of towards the end of the game, you kind of figure out, okay, this is a magic caster type weapon. This is a physical damage type weapon. So yeah, I mean, I went and I had Chadley, which we gotta talk about him a little bit. Um, I had him, refill my points or whatever, and then some of the weapons, yeah, I went in and just let it select the stuff because it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna get all the magic stuff. I'll just let the game do it
Mhm.
for me. Um, Chadley, amazing addition to the game.
Yeah,
He was he might be the most memorable character that was added that wasn't in the original. I think. I loved all
yeah.
his little VR challenges and like the
Oh, you didn't like
summons and
Scarlet?
Scarlet was in the original though.
Was she in the see? It's some of those like small secondary or third characters, especially as you go past the first past Midgard. I just forget, man. It's
Here, I'll say this and you'll remember that she was in the game. She has the slap fight with Tifa on the cannon
okay.
where you have to
Yeah,
like press the button and it's like the
yeah,
little polygonal slap. So she's like,
yeah,
eh, and then
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
like, do it back and forth. Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Wow, totally forgot about that. Yeah, I need to replay the original, man,
But
for sure.
they did redesign her. You can see my cats fighting in the background over there.
Oh, that's
They
fun.
did redesign her for this, and they kind of like laid on. I feel like they had like these like crazy like kind of anime stereotypes for all the board members of the Shinra.
Mhm.
But they laid on them in the remake, and I liked it, man. I liked a lot of stuff they did with that.
Yeah, it was cool to see those, 1997 polygons in real form. Like I thought Heidegger was awesome looking. Like, and he looks just it's so crazy. It's like your brain fills in the gaps. It's kind of like reading a book, how you kind of fill in the gaps in your head. But Heidegger looked exactly how I imagined him to look. Like exactly. And that's crazy to me that they were able to fully realize that. Same with Tifa, same with Barrett. Like I just thought those characters, they just look so good and so natural. And it's exactly how my brain wanted it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think President Shinra maybe might be the only person that was an exception to that for me. Um, Everybody else, like Reeve and people like that, if you'd seen Advent Children when it came out, that kind of set the base model for a lot of these people. Like Barrett, Barrett looks drastically different in this. Tifa looks pretty similar. Aerith, Cloud, Red 13 is like pretty much exactly his Advent Children model.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and most of the like like Rufus was in Advent Children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I hope that they kind of I hope his like path to being not a douche is like a little bit like more explained this time through because in in the original it's like all through FF7 he's like the worst person ever
Yep.
and then he gets blown up and then suddenly he's this really cool guy in Advent Children.
I was
Um,
just confused. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean I watched Advent Children the other day. I had to make this comment and like it's not a good film. Like it's all the nostalgia play is great and the fight with Sephiroth at the end is fantastic, but like all the other stuff leading up to that
No,
is just like
it's like
yeah.
watching both in this case. It's like watching both types of Resident Evil movies, like the ones with Mila Jovovich and the digital ones are they're tough, man. And
Yeah.
I don't understand. I feel like I could have written a better screenplay than what they came up with. It's just it you can easily tell it was like we have this intellectual property, how can we make more money off it? And it sucked. I've seen Advent Children once, maybe like 7 years ago, and I was like, oh, once is enough. This is great.
Yeah. I remember
Do anything for me.
when that came out and I had uh the old CRT like 19-inch computer monitor with the glass that's like that thick and me and like six of my friends crammed into my little tiny room and gathered around that monitor and watched it in Japanese with the subtitles like the first day that it was available to get in the US. And I just was blown away by it. then because it was like, oh my god, look at all these graphics and
Yeah.
all these characters and all this stuff. And then you watch it now and it doesn't even look that good, and you're just like,
It's
ugh.
kind of crazy though how quick technology has like movies that you used to watch. Like I was actually thinking, I don't know why, I was thinking about the Matrix yesterday and how, we're at what, 21 years since that movie came out. I remember when that movie first came out, my mind was so blown. I was like, they're never gonna top this. And then Avatar comes out and just absolutely destroys the CGI. And it's crazy that movies that we used to watch are now are middle to low end video game renderings, which is, I mean, it's crazy. Like, what's Final Fantasy VII Remake going to look like on the PlayStation 9 in 2042? That's what I want to know.
It's just crazy to me that the in-game graphics in this are like so mind-blowing that they don't have to use a cutscene.
Nope.
Like I mean, even if you look at the tech demo they put out at E3 for the PS3 that had everybody talking about it, the in-game graphics for the remake look way better than that tech demo looked. And it was a tech demo. That was a pre-rendered like little movie they put together. And the stuff that they're doing in the remake now, like 10 years ago, Pixar couldn't have done,
Nope.
you know. And if they
Um,
did, it would have taken like 1,000 computers like 10 years to render it all, and it would have just now got finished.
And one of the things I really like about like when you do kind of go into the cutscene ish mode, you keep the weapons that you have. Like they don't stock your Buster Sword in the cutscene. Like if you have, like I remember, I noticed this because Tifa had the mithril
Yeah.
claws or whatever. I was like, man, that's in the cutscene. Like that's awesome. Like they put it right in there, and that's something like I remember when I was a kid watching these things. Like it's like, man, that's not me. That's like they're cutting to just a pre. But no, like the mithril claws are in it, and I think that's really neat. And that's why like all those small details are is just the reason why there's no way this could have just been a one game release. Like, and that's why I'm totally cool with it because I played 30 or 40 hours. I'll play another. I'll pop it in again in a year or two, and replay it. Um, I I would prefer depth and breadth. And if you have to release it, if I have to spend 180 bucks on a 3-part game, I don't care, man. Like I'm so satisfied, including the ending. I'm so satisfied with my experience with it that like none of that stuff matters. And as you can tell, I've already had to have this argument with a few of my friends before about like why I'm totally content with the way it came out. But I am like I thought it was great. Like the little stuff, man, really made it for me. So
I feel you on most of that. Um, you mentioned the weapons being in all the scenes and everything. That totally blew me away too. I'm playing through the original on PC, and so I have all these like mods and stuff on it to like make it look better. And one of the mods actually does that, where like when you're walking around the world map, you actually have whichever sword Cloud has
cool.
on your back, and like that to me was just like, this is amazing, that happened, because we all remember the original where it's like, okay, his model, his little pre-rendered polygonal model has the Buster Sword, and the 30 different swords in the game you can equip, but that's the one that's on the damn model, and it was like that for all of them. And I loved all of Barrett's like guns that he had, that they changed all those out. Tifa's gloves, even the I love the materia slots on the
Yeah.
weapons, and you could see the materia in there, and it was just like, even on her gloves, little tiny details like that. They put a ton of care into a lot of. I mean, just so much of this game that really impressed us. Let's talk about the controversial part though, because
All right, let's do it.
we put it off.
Let's let me
So
stretch real quick.
at the
All
end,
right.
to me, where this game goes off the rails is like Hojo's lab, right? So I thought his lab was filler, like where they have you go through all those little tunnels and fight all those enemies and all that stuff. And Hojo's like cackling in the background, doing this little evil villain laugh. And don't get me wrong, like that's his character. I'm not
Mhm.
faulting them for that, but I was like, did somebody get to this and there was 34 hours and they were like, we need to say it's 40 hours. That sounds better for marketing. So let's pad this a bit. Um, I didn't enjoy Hojo's lab. I didn't enjoy that section, and then we get out onto the highway. Now, the highway chase was spectacular.
Dope.
I didn't like the motorcycle game earlier during Jesse's chapter. I did not like the motorcycle game. I was like, I don't think this is good. It's like clunky, and I don't like it. I like the original motorcycle game better. But then when we did the highway chase at the end, I loved it. So I don't know what the difference is. I mechanically there probably isn't one. Maybe just it was just me going, I don't want this at this part of the game, or it was really long. I thought during Jesse's chapter, like the motorcycle section, I thought it felt long.
Yeah.
Um, but then
And
that
it was
boss fight,
essentially just a tutorial for
right?
the end. Yeah.
Yeah, but that boss fight was amazing. Like, because in the original game, they didn't have the ability to have like a really intricate highway chase. So you
Mhm.
stop, and then the boss rolls up, and you fight him. And I'm waiting on that, and then it's like, oh no, we're fighting him on the motorcycle. We're having the boss fight on the motorcycle. Amazing. But then you get to the end, and they have this sequence where Aerith kind of like, I guess, like clues Red 13 into the future somehow, and then
Mhm.
she opens like some miracle gate where like you can transcend time or something, and then you fight the Whisper Dementors and supposedly like break their hold on um on the timeline, I guess, or break their ability to preserve things. It's not really, they don't really tell you 100% whether Sephiroth controls them or is working with them, or whether they're fighting against him, or none of that's really made clear.
I don't think they're with him, because if they were with him, they would have kept Barrett dead in
Right.
the president's thing. But yeah, it's funny getting to the end of that, and my friend was playing through it 2 nights ago. I beat it last week, and he's like, "Yeah, I just defeated, or I'm on the rooftop, and I'm about to go get the motorcycle, and I'll be done in like an hour, right?" And I was like, "Enjoy staying up till 3,
Yeah.
because that ending is long. The front end of the Shinra building I felt like was really short, which kind of stinks. Like, because I wanted to explore the offices a little bit more, because you get that in the game,
Right.
where you have to like run people across like one by one and all that. Like, I thought that stuff was real fun.
They
But
did a
you're
good
right.
job
The
with the mayor though. Like,
Yeah,
mayor was awesome.
yeah, and so I mean, you have to recreate some of that stuff, but I did feel Hojo's lab was a little long. Um, I felt like they did that a couple times in the game, like going back into the sewers. I thought could have been a different avenue, like before you get the grappling hook or whatever. Um, Sometimes like just some backtracking and things like that. I didn't love kind of that filler stuff, but yeah, Hojo's lab was a little bit weird. Um, and I guess you face Hojo eventually in like Disc 2 in the original, right? Something like
Um,
that later
yeah, the
on.
very end of just two when you go back to Midgar, you run into him a few
Yeah,
times throughout the game.
yeah. So I didn't like that Red 13 wasn't a playable character. I really wish, but I totally understand why they didn't, and I'm sure he'll be a playable character in the future. The one thing I really liked about the arbiters, or the whispers or whatever, is that when you fight the three of them, they represent they're mirrors of the party you're with. So one of them has a sword, one of them has like a gun or something. I forget exactly, but I thought that was really cool. Once again, it could have just been metaphor for metaphor's sake, but I thought that was a fun battle.
Yeah, I mean the battles themselves. I mean, especially the fight with Sephiroth is fantastic. I mean, the fight with him was amazing. They really went all out to make that like this really cinematic type event, but where you still had a lot of control over it.
Mm.
My biggest issue, I think, with this game is I need to talk to someone who knows nothing about Final Fantasy VII at all and just picks this remake up, because I don't think you're gonna enjoy it. Like, I don't think if you know nothing about Advent Children, Crisis Core, the original, and you just pick up remake, I don't know if someone would be so enamored with it, because for one, like I feel like they did Sephiroth like horribly, right? Like, if you already know Sephiroth, which we do, we know his motivations and who he is, and like that he just has this fascination with tormenting Cloud. Um, I think if you already know all those things about him, then it's like, oh my God, there's Sephiroth, man, that's the guy, and you know he's up to some nonsense at the end. You're like, oh man, this is his new plan to destroy the planet or whatever. And I still hated that, but I got it. But I feel like if I didn't know who he was, I'd be like, they did a terrible job. I mean, I they did a terrible job explaining him if you didn't know
Yeah, it
who
was
he
just like
is.
ominous. You know, he's an ominous presence for Cloud, but you don't know why. But I mean, that's kind of like how the first part of Midgar is in the games too, or in the original, right? Like you know who he is. I mean, you don't meet Sephiroth until the Shinra building in the first one, right?
Correct.
So
He
I think they
kills.
might be playing the long game there.
Yeah, he kills President Shinra, but one of the things about the first game that made him so menacing was like you kind of like heard stories about Sephiroth. First, you heard he was dead, then he shows up, and you don't really like gradually throughout the game you were introduced to like, okay, well, this is how powerful this dude really is. Whereas in this game, it was just like he's just like God mode right off the rip, and it's like, why didn't you just kill everyone? So I don't know. I maybe they just really wanted a Sephiroth fight at the end of the game set to One Wing Angel. If so, I get it. Like I wanted it to, even if even if I am not ready to admit that most days, I wanted it to. But you
It
know,
would have been tough to, yeah, and it would have been tough to end the game just with them looking at the end of a broken road. I mean, because that's what I thought was coming too. They get to the end of the road and they see the great vastness of not being, it rains on them, which I thought was really cool. Like I thought that was a really neat effect they did because you're not under. It just shows that you've been under. While this game has been massive, you've been under this plate for the entire game, and there's an entire world out there. So I was actually really curious to see how they were going to do the ending. I did not think the ending was going to be another 2.5 hours of the game.
yeah, it was like a really lengthy. From the time you go through that portal, that fight with the whispers and stuff was like really long, and
Mhm.
stuff just went like way left field. And then, once you have the fight with Sephiroth and you beat him, I liked the portions after that. I don't know what they're hinting at with Zack being alive.
No idea.
That to me is like, okay, well, where is he, and why do I have his sword? And to me, if Zack is still alive, that breaks so many things in the timeline, like with Aerith's character and like with Cloud and all his stuff that he goes through and deals with, which I did love that they laid the groundwork for a lot of that in this. Like they really kind of did a better job than the original did at this point in the game of like kind of hinting towards Cloud. There's a couple times where Cloud's like, "So Tifa, what have you been up to for the last 5 years or whatever?" And she's like, you know what? Let's go change out some water filters for these
Yeah.
guys." And she's like avoiding it, and it'll be interesting to see how that portion of the game when Cloud's backstory is revealed, how that comes out, because they're gonna have to really toe the line on that to not make Tifa seem like a bad character, like to where people don't hate her because she has been hiding all this stuff from him. And in the original, with the text and the little pixelated model, it's kind of easier. But with this one, where she's just this adorable, like, loving, like, character, and, we're going to have that 180 where she's like, yeah, I mean, I knew that you weren't in Soldier and you've been impersonating somebody else and all this stuff you think happened didn't happen. And this whole time, and I just haven't said anything. I mean, that's gonna be they're gonna have to spend a lot of time on that to make sure they get it just right, so it doesn't like villainize her.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how they go through the. Well, I see it as being a perfect open for the second game, where they like right after you leave Midgar, you go into Calm. I think you go. I
Yep,
think that's where you go.
for the long ass
And then
cutscene.
oh my god, 45 minutes at least of you just hitting X, 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 just going through the dialogue. So I'm interested to see because that's the next stop if we're going timeline wise. I'm interested to see how they cut that apart. It could be a great intro to the game. Maybe they start it as a flashback, and then it goes right into like the flashback is the intro of the game, and then it goes in, because man, that was the longest. I haven't, I mean, besides like Metal Gear Solid games, like that was the longest exposition of any game I've ever played, and I was just like, dude, I hate reading. This is
Mhm.
terrible.
Yeah, it
Oh,
is long, and it's gonna be interesting to see. I agree with you. I think if it was up to me, I think I would open the game with that, with Cloud telling the story, and like they kind of let us play through it all. You go through like
mhm.
Mount Nable, and you get to probably play as Sephiroth a little bit, which would be really sweet.
That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, and then
They better not take that from us. Yeah.
it better not. I want to fight that gold dragon as like little Cloud with like 100 HP, and Sephiroth's got like 40 million HP, and he's just like, okay, you're dead. Um,
Yep.
I want him to do that, and then yeah, at the end, like just kind of like as the city's burning and like Sephiroth's there, just like fade into the hotel room.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So
Calling it. Yeah. That's what's
yeah.
gonna. Hey, Square.
Well, now when they don't
Call
do
it.
that, we can be mad, and
Yeah, we'll be on the same
we
page.
come back here and review this second
Yeah.
part, and we'll be like, oh, this is awful.
Well,
Um,
the second part, I'm excited because it has the gold saucer and stuff. But other than that, like, what else are they going to be able to possibly include in like this middle part of a game that, to be honest, was kind of like the lull of it. Like, yeah, I know that you go on the ship and all that stuff, which will be fun, but I don't know.
I think they'll have to if they do keep Aerith dying and they end on that because that's the best place to end it.
Yeah.
Oh man,
But then
what
you
a,
have 2 discs to get through on the second half. Well, I guess the third disc is really just like side missions and the end, but still.
well, I think they're gonna flesh a lot of these side quests and stuff out. And I think the whole like where you're going after the huge materia and doing like the rocket with Sid and all that, I think
Mhm.
they're really
Oh,
going to
yeah.
flesh that out too. And I think this game really lays the groundwork for them to flesh out Wutai immensely. I think that's not going to be an optional section of the game anymore. I think they're really
Mm-mm.
going to flesh that out. So
Yeah, I think it'll be cool to see. I know that it's presumed that Wedge dies in the Shinra building, but Biggs is still alive.
yeah,
Good old Biggs, Charlie Sheen, Biggs.
yeah. Yeah, they definitely took some inspiration from that. You mentioned Wedge's voice actor earlier. That's actually the guy that played from Badger in Breaking Bad. If you're familiar with
Yep,
that, I
yep.
thought that was a great choice. Um,
Yeah, I just know him from The Office because I'm such a nerd about it. But yeah, he was in Breaking Bad. Yeah,
Same.
uh, yeah, it's great hearing him. I was like, I know that voice. It's great.
So that being said, let's get to the hard part and kind of wrap it up here. If you have to score this game out of 10, what are you gonna give it?
Um, at least a 9, maybe a 9.5. The only thing I didn't like was some of the filler that I felt was there, or maybe I'm just bad at side quests and did that. But if I had to chase one more gosh darn cat for some girl, like it's just it's so and you see him in all the Final Fantasy games. Just I've yet to meet a game that has any game that has like really awesome side quests that are worth doing. But it was nice as a completionist that they just list them. But yeah, 9 or 9.5. This is one of the better games I've played in a long time. How about you? How about you?
Pick up The Witcher 3 if you haven't played that.
I love, yeah, I watched the series and now I'm
Side
reading the books
quests
and
on that
yeah,
are
that game
uh,
is so massive,
oh, it
so
is. It's a
massive.
90 hours, like just the base game,
Yeah,
and
I'm
then
about like 25 hours in. I put it down. I'm a classic like 80%er. So if a game like starts losing my interest, and I once you put down a game and you pick up a different one,
it's so hard to
you
come
have
back.
no you have no idea what, and especially if you're in like the middle of it or towards the end. I am so guilty of just classic 80%er.
The expansions for Witcher 3 are longer than some games. Because like one of the expansions is 20 hours, the other one's like 40 hours.
What? How? How? That's so obnoxious.
It's so good.
Just like the books. Yeah, just like the books, though. The books are very uh, detailed.
Yeah. Before this becomes a Witcher 3 podcast, I would say I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I and I didn't hate the side quests. Some of them are filler, but I felt like I had to do them all because I wanted everything this game was going to give me, all the little unlocks and everything. I wanted all of that, and I'm kind of a completionist, but not in all games. Like I have to really be into the game, and if I am, it triggers that like completionist aspect of me, and that's how I was with this game. I completed all the side quests. I'm probably gonna go back and do some of the stuff you can't do until after the game, and I like that they have like a new game plus mode. Um, so I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10, and that entire 1 point is really just the changes, man. And like they did Sephiroth poorly, and I think he's one of the greatest video game villains of all time. And it is what it is. But overall, like the aspects of this game that I loved them more than I've loved a game in a long time. The aspects of it that I didn't like, they just fell flat with me, or I was rolling my eyes or whatever. So 9 out of 10. And overall, I mean, I think we both really enjoyed this.
Mhm.
Maybe an understatement.
Yeah, enough to do a podcast about it. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
right. Enough for me to
Yeah,
do a special episode of a show that's normally not even about video games and review this specific title.
a show that's usually about wrestling, which we are also both in, but we chose to not talk about. This is the first time wrestling has come up on this entire show.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but like wrestling, like Final Fantasy VII has been with me since I can remember. So it was cool. It's
right.
cool as an adult in my 30s to replay something that I played when I was 10. It's really and have it grow up with me or glow up with me in most of the ways that I wanted it to. So
I would be remiss if I didn't plug the rest of the podcast here at this point. If you like professional wrestling and you're into the Dark Side of the Ring series, check out all our other episodes that where we kind of really go in depth into those specific topics. That being said, we're gonna kind of wrap it up here. Dave, thank you so much for joining me for this. I
sure.
was so hyped for this episode.
Yeah, this was so much fun. I could talk about this. Maybe we could do like a 3 hour run of this where we just talk about it even more.
Right. Right, absolutely. Well, once again, thanks for being on, and ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. This has been an Evolved Review.